Welcome to Your Music Saved Us, where two friends blast ourselves into the past to relive and recontextualize the alternative Christian music we grew up listening to in the 1990s. My name is Clifton, and joining me today, of course, is Jay. How you doing, Jay?
I'm good, Clifton. Really excited to be here. Happy about our guest.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
We got a special guest today. This episode is supposed to be our DC Talk Free at Last episode, but we need a little more time to work on that. So we have a special guest today. Joining us is Alex Parker of Flying Tart. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
You want to do a little introduction of yourself before we get into things?
Sure, yeah. My name is Alex Parker. The things you might be interested in is I worked for REX around 1992, 93, 94, and then I started Flying Tart Records in 1996.
Wikipedia and Discogs say that you started Flying Tart in 1990. Are they just wrong?
Yeah, that's not correct. I think my first single came out, I want to say 96. Yeah, right about there.
Okay.
Actually, my first official, what I consider my first official Flying Tart release would be the Steve Taylor tribute that I did for REX, because I actually credited myself under a pseudonym for Flying Tart.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool.
And now I'm looking at Discogs. I guess 1994 was my official first release, a 7-inch record from The Throws, featuring some exclusive cuts. Yep.
Who were on REX before that, right?
I was working for REX. I started off as an intern when Doug Mann was still there. And then when he went to Forefront, I got hired on to do promotions, both radio, concert, and other. So, yeah, that was my job.
Okay, cool.
So what made you step out from REX and think, I'm going to start my own label?
REX was really cool when it started. When Doug Mann was there, he was the heart and soul of REX music. He signed a lot of good bands. He did not sign any garbage. Then a money guy came in and ran REX, and they began bulking it up with a lot of fluff and stuff that I didn't feel was true to the demographic or the audience that REX was trying to serve. And so I started to think outside the box. I had this idea for the Steve Taylor tribute, and I was doing college radio at the time. I was still in college, going to Belmont University, and I couldn't sell REX on the idea, so I decided I would do it myself. And so I started recording the bands and paying for it myself.
Oh, wow.
Just, from my part-time job money outside of college. And I leaked it to the press that REX was going to release the record, even though they hadn't agreed to it. And they said, okay, well, I guess we're putting this record out. And it turned out to be one of the biggest records they had at the time.
Oh, wow.
And just because of the audience, we were able to get a good prime spot at the Dove Award clubs. Like when the Dove Awards were going on, there would be a lottery. You would draw, and Sixpence on the Richer played, Steve Taylor played, Circle of Dust played, and it turned out to be a really great way to boost REX.
Yeah.
And because of the success of that, I had already in the back of my head several ideas for records. I wanted to do conceptual records. I wanted to do a Christmas record, to have the first hardcore punk industrial Christmas record, and I beat Brandon Evil at Tooth and Nail by 1 year on that.
You did, yes.
True.
Yeah.
We covered that last Christmas. It was a lot of fun.
Very cool. And I knew I wanted to do a Stryper tribute. So I immediately started, before the Steve Taylor record was out, I started piling people up for the Stryper tribute. And a lot of people were eager to join that. So I just had ideas that were outside of the REX box. And because the way REX was going, I had kind of a bad attitude about it. And I let it be known, which was, me being a punk, early 20s kid, I have a lot more tact now than I did then. So, yeah, I mean, they agreed and I agreed it was time for me to go do something else. So, yep.
So if REX was bringing a lot of fluff at this time, was Sixpence on brand or was it fluff?
No, Sixpence. I mean, there was like a sweet spot, 92, 93, as right about the time Doug Mann was exiting before the money guy came in. I'm not going to name him because I don't want to give him any kind of props. But before the money guy came in, there was a few months where it was kind of like, the kids were running the daycare, so we did a lot of stuff. We signed a lot of bands. I don't know if many people know this or not, but Sixpence None the Richer was a side project for Matt Slocum. He was in another band where he was the guitarist, and I can't remember the name of that band. They did one record on REX, but so they had this Sixpence demo floating around that was really, really, really good.
Yeah, and
Tyler Bacon slid into the A&R slot that Doug Mann had left at REX, and so he signed Sixpence None the Richer. They did a side project for Circle of Dust called Ariel Park. There was a band called Hot Pink Turtle that was signed. They actually did the first Sixpence record and the first Hot Pink Turtle record back to back. There was a remix record for Brainchild, Living Sacrifice, and Circle of Dust. And so all of that, and Living Sacrifice's second record, all of that happened in that small amount of time. Even though they weren't released immediately, that's when a lot of those records came into being. And so, Sixpence None the Richer was one of those good signings. Trying to think, I won't mention the garbage. I'm sure most people can appreciate or immediately guess what those are. So I'm not gonna, diss anybody.
The ones that haven't been mentioned yet.
Yeah, pretty much. And so not only the money guy came in, but another guy came in who his expertise was mostly coaching bands, giving them an onstage critique so that they could have more of a presence on stage, own it a lot more. And he came up with a record label, and it was called, what was it called? It was called, I can't remember the name of the record label, but they signed a lot of folk records. And I mean, those people were good. Those records were good, but most of them were already in the can. It wasn't anything new. Jay and Chris was part of that, and Nick Giaconia. Great people. Great records, but REX was starting to kind of float away from its hardcore heavy metal and punk aesthetic. So that's when I left.
So Flying Tart compilations are either famous or notorious for being kind of epic and crazy. Yeah. Did you get your start making mixtapes as a kid or anything like that?
I did do that as a kid. I actually did remix tapes. I don't know, there's always something really cool about recorded sound. I would just go record odd things, conversations in convenience stores. I really like listening to answering machine tapes because you never know what you're going to find on that stuff. I have a shoebox still full of answering machine tapes that I would buy at the Goodwill. I started doing that before Flying Tart folded, so I never got to really use any of that stuff. I'm thinking about doing some sort of podcast in the future where I just do like a sound collage of all this crazy stuff I've accumulated over the years. But I would do all that kind of stuff. I also worked on the weekends when I was in junior high and high school at a skating rink as the DJ. So I would always play, the good stuff, but I would throw in some curveballs there, and that was just kind of my experimental stage of, just having fun, entertaining the audience with a little bit more than the norm,
Okay. Oh, by the way, does Flying Tart come from Faulty Towers?
It does come from Faulty Towers.
Okay.
Most people don't know that, but yes, it does.
All right. One of you fill me in. I mean, I know Faulty Towers, but I don't get the connection to Flying Tart.
Oh, well,
It's
Faulty Towers, that was John Cleese, and the episode is so funny because when I came up with the name, a friend of, I don't know if you guys know who Tony Shore is, Dr. Tony Shore. He was a record promoter in Nashville when I was there. He worked for Word, what was that, Lime something record
Sublime?
label? I can't remember. Well, oh yeah, Sublime. And he had a radio show on a network that I think became, is it Love or it's not iHeartRadio. What's the one that's like a big Christian record syndicated radio station? I can't think of the name. Love FM or whatever it is.
Probably
K-Love.
Yeah.
A-Love, yes. It became K-Love.
Okay.
And I would be on his show every now and then when he bowed out, I took over the slot and hosted it with a high school kid, and so we would play all kinds of stuff. But what was the question? I'm sorry.
We were talking about
Faulty Towers and Flying Tart.
Yeah, sorry, man, I'm way off point. Sorry. So Faulty Towers, I was watching at the time. Tower Records was still in business, and they had very eclectic stuff you could rent on video. And so I had been into Faulty Towers at the time. I was trying to think of a name for my record label. I was thinking about calling it Jabberwocky at one point, and I was throwing all these names past Doug Mann, and he liked Jabberwocky the best, but I was like, still doesn't really hit the nail on the head. But I was watching Faulty Towers. There was an episode with Basil Fawlty, John Cleese, betting on a horse, and he was trying to mime the name of the horse to a fellow employee, and she said Flying Tart, and I'm like, oh, that's it. That's totally it. That's the name of my record label. One of the members of Dig Jesus did my first logo, and then I had another friend of mine do the logo with the spaceman, which has been the logo ever since.
Yeah, it's a great logo.
Yep.
That's a great logo. Okay, so I didn't know the Faulty Towers thing, but I knew you must have been a Monty Python fan because Christmas in Heaven.
Oh, yes.
Reference to the meaning of life and all that stuff. Okay.
I tried to get a band to cover that, but nobody took the bait. I still would really like to do that in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, we did discuss how that reference may have been a little risque for Christian audiences because there's at least fake breasts in the video for it.
You're right.
So
that's one of those 2%er jokes that not many people get.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't. I look back on Flying Tart and I'm like, wow, I did some stuff. Like
you did.
I mean. When everything ended, the last T-shirt I put out said it was great when it all began, and people were like, "Oh, well, that's Rose Tint My World from Rocky Horror." But once again, only 2 people, like 2% of the people, got that reference. And that pretty much like illustrated the way I was feeling about the music business and my involvement in it at the time. So, it served its purpose. But yeah, there were a lot of those little, I don't know, jokes. I think even at one point,
Easter
when
eggs.
yeah, no kidding. There was like a 5 or 6 month period where I was smoking cigars just because it was cool. And I was having to do my own like ad, and so I was putting like descriptions of the records in one sentence under each ad, and I couldn't think of one for one of the records, and I just put the description of the cigars from the cigar box on the underneath the description of the record, and then nobody seemed to catch it. So I like to have fun for sure. Yep.
So one thing I was curious about is that, Flying Tart put out, and I assume you're interested in a lot of more underground and edgy type music.
Right.
But you're in Nashville, probably like the most boring, standard music city in the United States. What's up with that?
Well, I went to school in Belmont University, and it was right about the time analog was switching to digital recording.
Mhm.
And there was still a presence of cool music in Nashville. I mean, there was an underground. Once again, Tower Records was there. There were some really good record stores. I can't remember the name of the comic book store that was popular there, but you would go there basically if anyone was touring through the area. If you went into that comic book store, you would see them in there buying stuff. I remember seeing members of the Cramps and Bobcat Goldthwait and several other people would just come there to shop. And you could find so much buried treasure there. And I still, to this day, have 6 crates of records that I bought from there and from Goodwill stores in Nashville. It does have a rich history. You can still actually get vinyl pressed there, virgin vinyl, like the really good vinyl.
Oh, wow.
You can get pressed there. So that's kind of why I did vinyl, because you just go there and watch them make a record on a platter. It's really cool. Even though computers were involved at the time, but still, you could watch them, etch a record, and it was really cool. Also, Vanderbilt's college radio station was really progressive for the time. They hadn't sold out to any kind of woke ideologies or any kind of they weren't really politicized. They were still really about good college radio. I mean, and I think a lot of the inspiration that I got for some of the things that I did was on what I heard on college radio from Vanderbilt's radio station. I tried to get a show there, never happened, but I did go do a radio show at another college 20 miles outside of Nashville. So I still had my college radio fix and where I could, play goofy stuff. And I got a lot of angry calls because people were like, "Why are you playing this garbage stuff? I don't want to hear Sesame Street." I'm like, well, I was having fun. But yeah, Nashville, I don't know about now so much, but, this is almost 30 years ago. It's hard to believe that much time has passed, but,
I know.
But yeah, it did have an undercurrent and a history that was, you had to look for it, but it was there.
Yeah. And back to the college radio station thing, I think we interviewed the guys with the Julies a few months ago, and they mentioned that I think that you heard them on a college radio station or something like that.
I got their demo, I want to say from the Huntingtons.
Oh, really?
I think one of the bands I was working with.
Maybe you heard Huntington's on. Maybe that's what the story was. So. I don't know. Anyways, I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think who. I first heard of Chicago Guevara on college radio before they ever got signed. That was cool. Yeah, I can't think of any bands that I discovered that I later signed on college radio, but okay. I mean, it could be. I have no idea.
So you left REX because you felt like they weren't holding up the scene that you were trying to participate in. Any other goals that you had with starting Flying Tart, I guess?
Any goals?
Yeah. What were you trying to accomplish?
Well, I heard a lot of bands that REX was not going to sign, and I don't know if you want to call it like a gift. I think I don't know how many of your listeners are into church and all that kind of stuff, but I really feel like now it was a prophetic gift. That it got to the point where I would hear stuff on the radio, and then I'd go look in Tower Records, and by the album cover, I could tell, like, oh, that's probably that band, because it looks like what they're trying to do, and more often than not, that would be the case. But there were a lot of bands, like Joe Christmas was one, where if you heard their demo, it was not impressive. I mean, it wasn't anything that you would think like, oh, wow, these guys are going to write some pop songs and they're going to go places. I mean, But I was like, I just have a gut feeling about these guys. I'm just going to go do a record. And it turned out to be a stinking good record. And because of my financial position at the time, I had to sell it to tooth and nail. But I don't know if most people know that I did the first Joe Christmas record.
We do, yes. In
yeah,
fact, so I'm going to skip to that real fast because I do want you to tell us the story of you calling Brandon Ebel Tooth and Nail. Because in my head, just give me a second here. In my head, it goes something like this.
Oh wait, we can't hear it, Clifton.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, the way it happened was I had that record in the can. It was good. Even Steve Hindalong, even though we recorded it at the Choir's studio, Neverland, and Steve Hindalong was in the room pretty much the entire time we did the record. And he's like, he told me, you know, I work on a lot of records. I can't get Joe Christmas out of my head. Their songs are so catchy and good. And I'm like, yeah, I know, dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, how are you going to get it out? I had no distribution. I had record label imprint. That's why my first couple of records went out through Liquid Disc. They were distribution deals. I was trying to get distribution and nobody was going for it. The one thing that Brandon Ebel, like, he came from marketing. He knew all about marketing. So and you can see that with his label. I mean, he marketed the brand. I knew all about music. And so that's why I would go after bands that, like, these guys can write songs. These guys know how to craft a good song. And so that's what I would go after. I was trying to get distribution with Tooth and Nail, and Brandon's like, I just want to buy them. I just want to buy them. And I already had several records out. The Huntingtons had recorded their first record, which we then didn't release because they wanted to change their lead vocalist, and they had all new songs. So they didn't want to release the first record.
Wait, so you recorded something with more of the cricket stuff? Let's come back to that later.
No. The funny thing was, like, I did the Joe Christmas record. I sent it to Brandon and a couple other people trying to get distribution. Brandon just wanted to buy it outright. Yeah. And I had already pressed vinyl that had 3 songs, 1 song from the record, 2 unreleased cuts. They did a cover of I Love Rock and Roll. And we did the Striper cover. And I want to say there was 1 or 2 other things we did that were just in the can for future use with Joe Christmas. So yeah, Brandon just wanted to buy it. He was not interested in distribution deals. And the Huntingtons, when they were still Cricket, when they went to record their first record, they actually did a cover of Couple Skate by Joe Christmas. And they didn't tell me, and I was there, and they're like, hey, check this out. And I was like, oh, that is amazing. Like, having my first record already covered by a band, that's incredible. So yeah, that's how it happened. It you know, because I was a kid at the time, it broke my heart because the one thing you don't know in your early 20s when you're doing something like this is you think it's all about you, and you think it's all, you have your heart hung on it. And so that was heartbreaking at the time, but I knew it was a good record, and it really paid off for them, even though they only wanted to do 1 more album. But that's the story behind that.
Okay, I definitely want to ask about Huntingtons, but I'm going to hold off.
No, it's okay.
Tell me, I want to kind of get a little bit of the history. So it looks like the first thing you really put out officially was that Throws 7-inch after leaving REX. Then kind of, I don't know, take us through some of the highlights after that. What else were, it looks like you did Spyglass View, and then you did that Scattered Few.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of bands I liked, and I knew that the Scattered Few, I just thought was a great record that didn't get a lot of attention. Sin Disease, I think, was the name of it. I mean, it's still, I think it holds up, with anything that came out in the time. Most people don't know that Scattered Few was the backing band for HR, who was the lead singer of Bad Brains. when he would go on
okay,
tour,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they would be his backing band. So, yeah, you can totally see how that connect happens. Let's see. So a Spyglass Blue, I had reached out to Alan Aguirre to. I was trying to get them to reissue their Sin Disease record on REX because REX had landed a distribution deal into the mainstream market with Relativity. So we were doing college radio promotion at the same time we were doing Christian radio promotion. I was trying to get that record re-released. And I was told under no certain terms would REX have anything to do with Scattered Few. So I knew they had a demo, and I got their demo remastered, and we had that out, 94, 95, Cornerstone. We had that CD out. And Alan Aguirre was like, well, I have this other side project called Spyglass Blue. Do you want to hear it? They had 4 songs already recorded, and so I did vinyl on that. We were going to do a full-length record. That never happened. Just between my temperament and his, it wasn't a good mix. Now, long story short, yeah. So he went on to do something with, another record label. I can't think of the name of it. Let's see, Situation Taboo. What happened is I signed a lot of bands out the gate. Like, actually, Brandon Ebel and I had, we were pursuing the same bands at the same time. Morella Forest was one of those.
Okay.
But I knew that, like, Tooth and Nail, I mean, they had more of an open market. They knew what they were doing. They had a track record. So, Brandon Ebel and I had kind of an unspoken agreement of, like, I could borrow, quote unquote, some of his bands if I wanted to do compilations. He was pretty cool about that. So, yeah, that's Morella's Forest. Actually came to Nashville. They were playing a show, and they did their Striper cover while we were doing the Joe Christmas record. Let's see, there was another record label in Athens, Georgia. I can't remember the name of Grey Dot, I think was the name.
Grey Dot.
Yep, that's right.
And they approached me about doing a 7-inch vinyl for one of their bands. They were like, can you, Sunday's Child was the name of the band. Mm-hmm. They were like, could you press vinyl for these guys? We'll pay for it. But they really want to do something on Flying Tart. And I, at the time, was my next tribute record, which never happened. I wanted to do a Sesame Street tribute record. So some of the bands actually did Sesame Street songs, and, I still have dats on some of that stuff. That's where the Throws 7-inch came from. They did the C is for Cookie from Sesame Street.
Right, okay.
Yep. So I did this single, I did the Joe Christmas single. There was a guy in Canada named Norman, and he had his own show on one of the more popular stations that was a college radio station in Canada, and he wanted to do a single, so we did that 4 songs about motorcycles. That was his.
That's because that's the weirdest thing. Well, no, but
yeah, I mean, it was it was the kind of thing where he wanted to. He once again, he was like, I have these 4 bands. They want to do. They already have songs. Strato Chief, I thought was. I tried to sign them, but they didn't want to sign to a record label. Damien actually had stuff on Sub Pop.
Already,
I don't know.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
But like he had a record out on Sub Pop at the time, and Blenderhead actually, that was the Tooth and Nail band. Then 12 Point Buck. I don't know where they came from or where they went afterwards, but. Yeah, Norman just wanted to do a 4-inch or do a 7-inch with these 4 bands, and yeah, I was like, cool, no problem. I think he paid for part of that. I know he did all the recording and the artwork, and Fluffy came about because Blonde Vinyl had gone under. They went out of business, and I really was a Fluffy fan, and I met Chris Colbert at some sort of festival in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just walked up to him and said, hey, man, do you want to do a record? And he actually became the main producer for a lot of the Flying Tart stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's
go ahead.
Steve Hindalong and Chris Colbert are the two names that seem to always pop up when just on. We're both from small town Texas, you know, so we were watching this from way afar, you know. Everything seems like a different world as far as we're concerned, but those are two names we always knew because they're always popping up on the Flying Tart stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Chris Colbert and I really instantly got along. We had a lot of the same bands we liked, a lot of the same TV shows, movies, etc. He already knew the members of Joe Christmas. He was gonna do a record with them under a different name for Blonde Vinyl, but Blonde Vinyl went out of business. I didn't know this when I signed the band. It was only when I started talking to Chris that I put it together that they knew each other. And so the thing that was interesting is Chris and his wife, I can't think of her name, but she was in the what was the band she was in?
Halo Friendlies? Is that her?
No, it was. Oh. Hang on, I'll tell you in a second. It was another band. Oh gosh, Plague of Ethels. That was her band.
Okay.
They went through a divorce right before the Fluffy record was recorded, and Chris wanted to fly out to California, where he was from originally, Los Angeles, pick up the lead vocalist, and he was going to write the lyrics for the album on the drive back from California to Nashville. And they actually recorded a good bit of it in California. That's why some of the drum work is very intricate, because their drummer was an ethnomusicologist. He studied world music, and he wanted to just experiment with some of the stuff he had learned. So they recorded part of it in California, and they recorded the other half in Nashville. That's how Steve Hindalong's on the record. I don't know if you guys remember a band called Velocipede that did 2 records on REX. Their vocalist is on the last track. Let's see. We did the only thing I said is I want a cover song of Convoy. Because, like, I don't know why. I was just like, that is just the most ridiculous song ever recorded. And I just thought it would be really cool that Fluffy did a cover of that. Chris would not do a Striper cover, but he does play guitar on the last track of the record, where he's playing guitar. He played the guitar part, and I did the vocal on the last track on the Striper tribute. So I did get him to concede that.
So around, I'm going to ask about Huntington's now. Around this time, you must have met what was then Cricket. How did you find out about Cricket? How did you meet them? And then, I don't know, what happened?
Forefront Records did a compilation. No, wait a minute. It wasn't Forefront. Oh, gosh. Who's the guy that does their vinyl now? I can't think of his name. He did a compilation of a bunch of East Coast bands. That's where I found the Julies. That's where I found the Huntingtons. I found Alika, that was at the time Sorrow of Seven. I just heard all these bands. I'm like, these guys, they're like really good. And like, I immediately called them because whoever put out the compilation put their contact info in the liner notes. And so like,
nice.
I nabbed the Huntingtons, and it was funny. Like, after I had signed Alika, Sorrow of Seven, someone from Forefront was like, you beat me to the punch, man. I was going to go after a lot of these bands. I'm like, sorry, first come, first serve. So, so yeah, I don't know. Let me see if there's any of the other bands. Situation Taboo, I think I heard on that compilation. Okay. Yeah, so I found the Huntingtons when they were Cricket on that compilation, and yeah, I mean, to me that was a no-brainer. I don't even remember the song that was on the comp, but I'm like, I these guys, they have some chops. Cliff was the singer at the time. It wasn't It wasn't the guitarist. It was Cliff.
Mikey.
Yeah, it wasn't Mike. It was Cliff that was doing the vocals. But I mean, you know, I knew instantly where they were coming from and what the potential was. So yeah, I jumped on that pretty quick.
But then they recorded an entire album with that style.
Yeah, with Cliff as the lead singer, they were under the name Cricket. Mm-hmm. And Brown Cow was the name of that record. I think they've released it themselves.
Yeah, I heard that one. Yes.
They have on Spotify and places you can find it. Yeah,
right. I do remember that I had to call Buddy Holly's.
Right.
Yeah, because they were the Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
And the Crickets, yeah.
So that's why they changed their name to the Huntingtons, because they're the manager of his estate was like, no, you can't have a band called Cricket. So that's why they changed their name. And then they did their second record. And Chris Colbert recorded that. And they, pretty much all that was straight to tape, if memory serves. I wasn't there for the recording, but they did it all at Great Out Studios in Athens, Georgia. Pretty much I dropped Chris Colbert off. And the lineup was a little different. I think they had a different bass player who ate all of their food. I remember that. Crazy stuff you remember, right? But yeah, they recorded it there, and that was I think the second full-length record that I released, I believe. Yeah.
Were you happy with the sound change? Because I feel like the sound from Crickets to Huntingtons was, you know, a decent shift, like different sound.
Right. No, I mean, the one thing that, because I had dealt with it at REX, there was a lot of A&R push on certain bands to do certain things. There was a band, I think, called Killed by Cain, and the only reason they were signed is REX wanted to make them sound like the Christian version of something. And I really did not want to do that. I wanted to give the artists as much leeway and as much freedom to do whatever they wanted to do, you know, shy of swear words and stuff like that. But, you know, some of those slid through. I wanted to give the artist, let them make the record. My philosophy at the time was, as a record label, you let the artist make the record, and then it's your responsibility to sell it. Not the record label's going to craft something to shove out to a certain demographic or a certain audience. I was very big on letting the artists do what they wanted to do. And, you know, I mean, there were some times when things were recorded that were just awful, but, you know, either we put them, well, I think of one of the bands, I'm not going to tell you which one, but like they recorded an entire album. They had some good tracks, but one of the band members decided they wanted to go in and remix the entire album themselves. It sounded so bad, but I was like, you know, I have to take this because I don't have more money for you guys to go in and do more stuff. And it suffered because of it. I mean, it really did suffer. And I put the record out. I wasn't super excited about it. And there's still some solid tracks from the band I'm talking about. And, but, you know, I let them do what they wanted to do, and I put it out. So, yeah, with the Huntingtons, the change in the sound, I was totally cool with. I think it was an improvement. I think the band said it was an improvement. Then when they did their second record, they did it in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they lined up the producer, and I mean, it was great. I mean,
yeah.
By that time, I had sold the record label to a division of Polygram called River North, and they changed their name to Platinum Entertainment, and then they went out of business. But the Polygram people were really surprised at that record because it was right there with like the Weasels, that kind of those kind of bands. They were really surprised with that record, and they got behind it in the college market because it turned out a lot better than they thought what they were getting. Yeah.
And they have not stopped. Those guys are still, they were here actually a few weeks ago. I went to see them here in Austin. And there were not enough people there, but it was a great show. So
Yeah, no, they have done very well for themselves. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm very happy for their success.
Yeah.
So, Alex, this made me think of one other question. We were talking about Joe Christmas. You sold that record to Tooth and Nail. That was 95,
something like that. Yeah.
And then looking at Flying Tart, it seems like in like 96, you guys put out a lot more stuff. Like you're putting out a lot. Did selling the record Tooth and Nail kind of help you, the money from that help you put out all the other releases?
Actually, the money from that only covered the recording of that record. I didn't make anything off of that. Yeah, I was not a savvy businessman for sure. I knew music. I didn't know business.
Right.
But I had all these things that were being created at the time. And so finally I was able to get them out. Once I was looking for a distribution, and I didn't know anything about this River North company, but a friend of mine worked there. I had known in the music business prior to that. His name is Rob Woolsey. He was a record promoter, freelance. He did a lot of Christian radio broadcasts. And he had taken a job at Platinum Entertainment to do their promotions. And I don't know how it happened. He wound up actually running the Christian division of that company. And I was going to him to look for distribution, and he said, "Why don't we just buy your label? You can come here, you can have an office, you can do whatever make the records you want to make." And I was like, once again, being a punk kid, I was like heavy-hearted about it, but I was like, what else am I going to do? I mean, by that time, I was in debt for some of these records. We had stuff recorded I couldn't pay for, so I wouldn't get the masters until I worked something out. So that's when Left Out came out, the Julie's EP. I mean, some of these bands were like, "Hey, when's our record coming out? When's our record coming out?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have enough money to put the records out. And REX had been sold at the same company. So that's how I was able to kind of co-opt 6 Feet Deep, that one record.
Yeah.
When they put it out through Polygram, it had the Flying Tart logo on it. It didn't have REX. Because they had bought the catalog, but there was nobody really running REX. So, had I thought about it at the time, I would have capitalized on that a lot more. But I had so much recorded that I needed to get it out. I had the Alika record recorded. That was already going through Liquid Disc. And once again, that was another case where I sold the record and the contract to Liquid Disc, as long as they agreed to put the Flying Tart imprint on it. I had the Fluffy record in the can. So that's where that Fluffy versus Phantasmic record came from. And then the 5 songs that were bonus, I can't even remember what the name of the band was. So there were 5 songs from the Fluffy record before the Fluffy record came out, 5 songs from Phantasmic that I did the EP on, which I don't know if people know or not. That was Tess Wiley, who was the bassist for Sixpence None the Richer at the time. That was her record.
Is that how you got connected with her? Is from Sixpence?
Yeah, Sixpence None the Richer. I worked their first 2 records at REX. I mean, I was there the day they signed the contracts. I was there at their first performance at Cornerstone. And it wasn't until the record was delivered that we were like, wow, we really have something here. This is really, really good stuff. I had already left REX when they were doing that EP that came out. But yeah, I was good friends with them. They stayed at my house when they would come through town. Tess Wiley from Phantasmic was dating Chris Colbert at the time. So that was the connect. Okay. So I think she was even at our house for like a month or so, just hanging out. She was in town, didn't have anything going on. Sixpence was about to go on the road, but they were getting their dates firmed up and getting a band vehicle. So yeah, Tess was hanging out at our house a lot. And I knew she was shopping her own stuff, and I was like, why don't I just, do, it was called Splendora at the time, which there was another band called Splendora. That's why she had to change her name to Phantasmic. But I said, why don't I just take the demo stuff that you have and just put it out just so you can have something to sell. So that was that record. And then actually Chris and I were driving to Indianapolis while the Huntingtons were recording their record in the middle of a snowstorm. And we were just like, throwing out our ideas. And it just came to me like, why don't we have Tess just do a one-off cover song record? I'll pick 2 of the songs. She can pick the rest. And that's how that I Light Up Your Life record came about. And that record was released after I had already left Flying Tart.
Oh, wow.
Same thing with the Circle of Dust record. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question about the Huntingtons or not.
No, you did. And I just the Tess Wiley thing for a second. I think her songs were great.
Jeez.
I wish she had gotten bigger and more credit because I think she was really, really good, and some of the songs were really great.
I was going to bring up her track on the Christmas album, Christmas in Heaven, is like devastatingly beautiful. Like,
No, it's so funny because the Christmas record I was rushing to get out because I really wanted to do a Christmas record that was cool. And it looks kind of like a Halloween record, but it's a Christmas record. I'm just like, no, that's just me. I think we made verbal agreements with each of the band members or each of the bands for like $500 per track. And I remember calling Tess and I'm like, I have to have your track. We're going to go, master the record the next week. I'm like, I have to have your track. So she just kicked it out and recorded it at home. And I remember getting the DAT, and I was playing the DAT for Rob Woolsey, and the Polygram attorney was in the room at the time, and he's like, "We paid for this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, this is awesome. Like, what are you talking about?" And it just shows the disconnect with the bigwigs and what was cool. But I'm with you. I really like that song. I should mention, kind of that ragtag stuff, like her track and Marriage is Madness from the Stryper tribute. That was Zach from Joe Christmas and one of his friends. He mixed that on an answering machine. He mixed the final mix down to an answering machine. And I'm like, because once again, I was going to master the record. And I'm like, I have to have your track. And he's like, I'm like, that's why you hear some of the wobbliness and some of the speed stuff going weird with that. I'm like, I don't know why. I just love that kind of stuff. That's a
bad joke about indie music come to life right there.
Exactly. I mean, how cool is that? I put out a record that's on national distribution that was mixed down to an answering machine. Mic drop. Yeah.
So back to 1996. You put out Julie's Left Out, Huntington's Starball Contribution, Christmas in Heaven. These are like the albums I listened to that year. By the way, like this is.
Well, thanks.
I mean and then next year, Duralux 121. I didn't listen to Situation Taboo, but I mean this is. I just want to say what a huge impact I think that Flying Tart at least had on me was this. I mean, these are to this day the Julies and Huntingtons are still great bands, and anyways.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thanks.
We'll stop right there.
At the time, I didn't know. I just knew what cool music was and what I wanted to put out. And I think it was one of the members of Morales Forest. Like we were sitting in Waffle House, and he was like, "Dude, do you take your record label seriously?" And I'm like, "That's a compliment and an insult." Thank you. I take it as a compliment. But yeah, I mean, 96 was the year that I got distribution. So like the Stryper record, the Huntingtons and Fluffy all were through Liquid Disc. That's how each of those came out. And then when you see all the stuff after that, that's when I actually had distribution with with Platinum Entertainment. 121, man, great band, great bunch of guys. I knew from hearing their demo, and I think I got it from the Huntingtons. I'm like, oh, no. They were on that compilation CD. It was Jehovah's Strength, the one that's on the Starball track. It was the exact same song. I'm just like, man, these guys, I have to sign them. And the good thing I can say is most of the bands after Flying Tart went on to do other stuff. I mean, they went to record on other record labels, or they broke up, like But Duralux went and did their own. They did 2 records on their own record label, and we actually, I really wish I had a copy of it, but we did an entire second Duralux record called "The Shady Mess" that has never seen the light of day. Only one of the tracks made it onto one of Duralux's other records, so there's an entire Duralux record that has never been released. And
interesting.
I think I have a DAT somewhere, but I don't have a CD copy of that. Yeah, I have to find a DAT player somewhere.
We need to come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
So I do have. I want to ask you a very vague question.
Sure.
About who did what's with the cover art for Flying Tart? Most of it's like cribbed 60s, 40s, 70s, like.
Well, because of my record label, I could do whatever I wanted to. So I'll kind of run down some of the titles. Breakfast with Amy, that Chris Colbert knew that was in the can, the Breakfast with Amy live at the Hollywood Bowl. And he had one of the Blonde Vinyl guys do that artwork. So that's how that album art came about. The Live Long and Perspire, which I just had a bunch of stuff, and I'm just like, I would really like to put this out, and why not? I had that, the Breakfast with Amy record, and Scattered Few. I had all those, and the Throws compilation. I had all those, or the Throws vinyl. I had all those ready at the same time for Cornerstone Festival 94, 95. The Live Long and Perspire. I found the cover art. A friend of mine had stolen it from her laundry room in her apartment complex. And it was like for these safety goggles, and I thought it looked really cool. And I actually got a cease and desist letter from the company that had that. Yeah, they were like, stop using our trademarked image. I'm like, well, I only did 500 CDs, so that's not a problem.
Yeah. Someone gave us the MP3s for that the other day, and it's on our YouTube channel now, by the way.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that's, that compilation, that was so much fun. I just knew I had to get something out to let people know I was doing stuff that was, that varied. I actually did pay for the recording of that Big Jesus live at Cornerstone, and I didn't have enough money to put it out, so the band took it to whatever record label they took it to. That was one of the cases where I didn't have enough money to put the record out and no distribution, so it's like I had stuff in the can. That's why those 2 tracks are listed there. And then the cover song of What I Am was someone that lived in my dorm room hallway. That was his final project for recording class. I was just like, man, that's just brilliant. I mean, that cover song was just like hilarious, so I had to put that out. The Plague of Ethels, by that time I was frequenting a lot of thrift shops in Nashville, which there were a lot of cool ones, not just Salvation Army and Goodwill, but there were some really cool thrift shops that were attached to organizations, religious organizations or churches. And I found that comic that is from the late great Planet Earth comic strip. And I just thought, that image just looks too cool. And that's all Xerox art. That whole thing I made on a Xerox copier. Let's see. Circle of Dust did their own album art. Phantasmic did her own art. The Huntingtons did their own art.
Oh, really?
Well, they got someone to do it for them.
Yeah.
The Starball contribution, I did that because, I would drive back and forth. I'm originally from South Carolina, so when I would go to visit my family, it was like an even stop from Nashville to Atlanta was like 4 hours. But in between, like a halfway point, there's this gigantic fireworks emporium there. And I would just go there. And the thing that was so funny is you would see the translations that were just not on, very loose translations. And the name of that firework on the front is called Starball Contribution. I'm like,
yes,
that is just the goofiest name for a firework. And I just had to put that on a record cover. So that's where that came from. And I was big into these children's story records at the time and Sesame Street. And so the inner artwork came from like a Star Trek children's story record. Yeah. Okay. So the Christmas record, I found all that artwork in some sort of thrift shop catalog, like from the 60s. Christmas catalog. That's where I got that from. Yep.
All right.
Nice. So one band we haven't talked about is Left Out.
Yes.
And I liked that first album quite a bit. I thought it was very catchy.
I listened to that so much.
I don't know. How'd you get connected with them?
Well, Brian Gray from The Blamed was at Cornerstone. I think 95 was the year I officially left REX. I'd given them a specific date that I was going to be leaving, resigning from the company. It happened to coincide with a really horrible record they were releasing. I'm like, wow, we're putting that out? Well, that's going to be my last day at this job. It was just a horrible record. And so that was going to be sometime in September. So I was still with REX in 94, 95, whichever year that was. And Brian Gray had finished his contract with Tooth and Nail, and he said he had this side project that he wanted to do. And I said, well, sure. I didn't even hear any of the songs. All I wanted was
wow.
I just knew, I knew what I was getting with Brian.
Yeah.
The only thing I said is I want to do this Bay City Rollers cover song EP. So can you do a Bay City Rollers song? That's where Saturday Night came from. And I think it's a flipping great cover.
It's a great cover.
Yes. But yeah, that's how I got connected with Left Out. I had not heard any of it. And then Clank was a really good friend of mine from the Circle of Dust days. He was a touring member of Circle of Dust, and Clank and I had just been really good friends. I don't know at what point. Oh, I know. The original bassist for the touring band of Circle of Dust had moved to Nashville because even though he was in Circle of Dust, that's not his thing. Like, he was much more like, had a Nashville vibe, singer-songwriter kind of thing. And so he moved to town. He and I were good friends. Chris Donatello, I think. What is his? Chris Donahue. And he and I were hanging out a lot at the time. And Clank came to town just to hang out with him. And so Clank and I started hanging out, and we've been, good friends ever since. And he was like, hey, I want to produce Left Out. And I'm like, sounds good to me, dude. So, Clank produced it. Chris Colbert recorded it. And once again, I think pretty much everything you hear on that first record was straight to tape. It was not,
wow.
I don't think there were a lot of overdubs, maybe a little bit, but not much. Yep.
Are there any bands that you guys passed on over the years that we might know
of? I remember a band we passed on at REX, Jars of Clay.
Oh yeah.
Oh
passed
wow.
on that. But
whoops.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't know. I mean, that one track that was huge and made it onto mainstream radio, that was a producer's record. That was, the band did not sound like that. The producer got them to sound like that. I'm not saying they're a bad band at all, but you know, a good producer is going to hear things that the band doesn't know could come about, or that could be added. You know, same thing with Sixpence. Armin Petrie, the guy who did their first two records, the first record. I mean, he brought a lot of stuff out of that band that you know, wasn't there initially. Sixpence was still a great band, but he really added the fine touches that took that record from good to great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we passed on Jars of Clay. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. I really regret not signing Five Iron Frenzy. I had a year. I had a 1 year lead on signing that band, and that was when there were no ska bands in the scene at all. I could have had them a year before the Supertones, a year before they signed to 5 Minute Walk. And I actually gave them some legal advice on that they wanted to put out a 7-inch or something. And I told them, you know, they wanted to put an Amy Grant song on there. I'm like, well, here's the steps you have to go through. I have been in contact with them, but I didn't feel their songwriting at the time was right there. But I really felt like the Holy Spirit was like, just do it, just sign it. And that was when I missed, because I should have signed them and let them keep writing, and then put out the record. But yeah, I had their demo a year before anyone heard about them. They were playing there was a stage at Cornerstone where indie bands could pay to play on the stage. That's where I first heard Five Iron Frenzy.
Wow.
I didn't pass on Goaty Hook, but that was another band that was like Brandon and Evil and I were both trying to court at the time. And I mean,
makes a lot of sense.
The thing about me is, still to this day, and even back then, I'm just like, I am not gonna lie to people intentionally. I'm not gonna like try and say I can do this for you and this for you and this for you. But both with Morellis Forest and Goaty Hook, I know Morellis Forest. I had already called them, reached out to them. We were actually in the first round of contract negotiations before Tooth and Nail heard about them. And Brandon Evil and I even had a phone call, and Brandon's like, if you really want to sign the band, I'm like, dude, they're going to do so much better with you. Like, you've got the distribution, you've got the track record, you know. And I told Morellis Forest the same thing. I told Goaty Hook the same thing. I'm like, you know, I'd really like to sign you guys, but I mean, Tooth and Nail has more going for them street cred right now than I do. So, you know, if you're looking to be big nationwide, that's who you need to go with. Yeah. I passed on some of the Grey Dot bands. I can't remember the name of the punk ska band they had, but they went on to sign with Tooth and Nail.
Squad 5-0?
Squad 5-0. Oh. I passed on them. Just because, like, I already had a couple of punk bands and I was wanting to do other things. And, you know, I didn't think they were a bad band. It's just like, you know, I'd rather allocate my resources somewhere else. Plus, once Flying Tart sold to Polygram, it became very evident that Polygram was not interested in making new records. All they wanted to do was absorb the catalog. So that last 6 months, even though I got a lot of demos, I wasn't looking to sign anybody new because I didn't, you know, there was no reason to obligate anybody, you know?
In 2020, Lost in Ohio came around and started doing re-releases, and they re-released the Julies and Fluffy. Have you had any contact with those guys?
Yeah, during lockdown, whoever put that out contacted me about writing liner notes or something like that. Same thing with Phantasmic. Somebody was acting on Tessa's behalf to reissue her stuff. I wanted to know if I had bonus tracks or anything. And that's when, you know, I hadn't really thought a lot about Flying Tart in quite a while. But in 2020, during the lockdowns, that's when I found Discogs, and I was like, wow, I put out like 50 plus records, and I didn't realize that. I'm like, I have a catalog, and then I had to research who had the rights for those people, or for the person that was putting out Tess's stuff, and then Velocipede also reached out to me because they wanted to reissue their stuff, and REX was owned by the same label. That's when I found out that One Entertainment had bought everything. And the odd thing is, One Entertainment was bought by Hasbro. So, like, Hasbro Toy Company owns all my back catalog. That's the crazy thing. Like, I mean, I'll take a little rabbit trail here. What I'm doing right now is I went to school for film. So I've done short films, and I now work for a company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Sparrow Pictures, who have done 3 documentaries, and they're doing narrative stuff. We're doing podcasts pretty much every day about the film industry and about their history. And so I actually have developed a series for streaming about, like, me as the main character from my REX to Flying Tart years. So it would be like each season would be 1 year. And I really want to pitch it to One Entertainment because they've got all these, the REX and the Flying Tart catalogs. Yeah. And this would be a great way to rejuvenate that stuff. And, maybe we can do some action figures at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
But, you can get Starball and Starball Contribution and G.I. Joe at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a catalog that's buried in their vaults they have no idea about. Yeah, I don't know. Lost in Ohio. I mean, whoever put that stuff together for the Julies reached out to me to do some liner notes, but that was like one internet conversation that didn't go anywhere. So, I know that Platinum Entertainment did these ridiculous 3 albums in 1 CDs that were issued. They had like the Huntingtons and Left Out, both Huntington's records and the Left Out record. And then they have the Circle of Dust with some other stuff. And they, the mainstream, cronies like to recycle stuff. So that's the only, that's the only other reissues that I know of. I mean, Clay Scott, Circle of Dust, he was able to acquire all his back catalog, which I am very happy he was able to do that. So he's reissued all his stuff. I don't know about reissues on the other stuff. I thought it would be kind of cool to dust some of this stuff off and do something at some point, but now that Hasbro owns the catalog, I don't know. I mean, even over the years, I've thought, I've even had dreams where I'm like telling family members and friends, I'm like, Flying Tart's doing new music, which I think would be kind of cool, but I, at this point, don't know the possibilities of that because I'm doing film stuff now. Yeah.
So that actually brings up a good question for me. So kind of take us through the end of the label, I guess. You sold it, you started working for them, and then kind of what happened?
I have a track history in the music business of working for labels that REX and Platinum Entertainment, they're poorly run. When I say REX, I mean Doug Mann did a great job of taking it to where it was in 92, 93. Then when the money guy came in and he was signing all this schlock, what most people don't, when you actually had record stores that carried this stuff, what would happen is you would sell the CDs into a record store and you get paid a part of what you're going to sell, not what they actually purchase. And back in that time, the 90s, record stores would have the option after 90 days to return the product. And so if it didn't sell, they didn't want it on their shelves and in their inventory, they could return it to the distributor. Well, there were fees tacked to that. There's a distribution fee for anything that doesn't sell, and there's a restocking fee to go back to the distributor if it doesn't sell. So you're selling it into, maybe a CD was $12.99. You would sell it into a record store for $7. I mean, arbitrary amount, is probably a little more than that, but you sell it in for $7. So you get the $7, but then you have to pay $8 to take it back because you're paying your restocking fee and your distribution fee. And sometimes there would even be like a warehousing fee if it just sat somewhere with your distributor. So it costs more money not to sell records than it did to sell records.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we were dealing with physical media at the time. It was the same thing for DVDs, videotapes, books, any kind of media, tangible media. So REX, when they started putting out a lot of schlock, were eating. They were going out of business fast because of that restocking fee. Because they were putting out crap that wouldn't sell, and they were taking it all back and losing money. And actually, when I left REX, I told Tyler Bacon, I'm like, I give this company a year and it'll go out of business. 3 months later, they went out of business.
Wow.
And then the same thing when I went to Platinum Entertainment. I've learned something through wisdom over my many years. There's this thing called due diligence. I never did any due diligence on the record company I went to, that I sold Flying Tart to, because they were exactly the same thing, only they were much bigger and they were through Polygram. So they ate a lot more on their returns. They were putting out some garbage. And their strategy was to buy labels for the catalog and then, milk the catalog for all it was worth. And yeah, I could see the writing on the wall with them. Plus, once again, I was a punk kid. My aesthetic was DIY, do it yourself. You go make the record, you get it pressed, you put it out. Now I was dealing with big wig, like real record company people. So they want to know, a year in advance what you're going to put out. And they want to know, target markets and marketing and all this advertising stuff. And I'm like, dude, I just make punk records and put them out. What's the problem? So they didn't like me at all. They really didn't. And I was dropped into this system where it was not DIY. It was very corporate. It was everything you put out has to have lots of paper attached to it with, travel expenses and all this stuff. And I'm like, my head was not there. Totally not there. And they made the mistake of giving me a corporate credit card. So I would just go to the record store and buy $400 in CDs. I'm like, this is research, so. I mean, I didn't get terribly excessive, but you don't give a 25-year-old kid making punk records a credit card with a $10,000 limit. You just don't do it. Yeah. So, it was kind of obvious. Not only that they were gonna shaft me, they shafted the Sixpence None the Richer. They shafted Circle of Dust, 6 Feet Deep. All these bands, the good thing was I was able to get most of my bands out of their contracts before I left, so they could go do whatever they wanted. The Huntingtons had finished their contract. 121 was a one-off, left out. I think we had 3 records signed, but I was just kind of like, I won't tell anyone if you don't tell anyone. Just go do what you want to do,
Yeah.
6 Feet Deep broke up. Duralux. The only thing I regret with Duralux is I wasn't able to get them their catalog. The 2 records they did for Flying Tart are buried in their vault. But Chris Colbert was able to go to do something else, so it all worked out for the bands. Once again, I was very heavy-hearted about everything that went on. I spent some of my own money from part-time jobs to try and get at least the name back, and attorneys were not into that. So, I pretty much had a nervous breakdown at age in 98, and I left Nashville for a couple of years. So that was the end of Flying Tart. Yeah.
Yeah. The Huntingtons have mentioned that Brandon signed them on the same contract that you had, so they actually got a much better contract than anyone else at Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, the thing that there was something that came into play, I want to say in 95, 96, called SoundScan. And long story short, SoundScan was a way of tracking record sales that was hard numbers. Whereas before that, record stores, Tower, or whoever would say, oh yeah, they would report back to the record companies, oh, we sold 10 copies of this. And usually those numbers were way off. I mean, way off. I think it might have even been 94, because it was like overnight, SoundScan was reporting actually every time a record barcode was scanned, that was a counted sale. So you had things like, you had, hair metal was still big at the time in 94. So bands like Extreme and Poison, their record sales bottomed out. But all of a sudden there's these bands like who is in NWA? Who's Nirvana? We never heard of this band. And you saw Garth Brooks overnight going to the top 10 and finding out that he was selling records in New York, not just Nashville. So all that happened. I mean, like the switch was turned on and hard numbers came into being. And that really revolutionized the record industry. And so with Huntington's, actually, I think with all the bands that I signed them to, they would be paid royalties on SoundScan, not on what shipped, because it would affect the bands the same as it affect the record labels. So if the Huntington ships under the old system, the previous contracts, if they shipped 500 records and 300 came back, then the band would owe the record label those sales.
Yeah.
And because you'd already paid them for that. So I learned from talking to Sixpence on the Richer and Circle of Dust specifically, because they were in that, they were drowning in that with REX. They owed more money they would ever be able to pay back. So I made sure with the bands that I signed, they would get paid on SoundScan numbers, and I gave each band the option. You can either get paid actual money, or you can get paid in product, which product, that makes them more money. I mean, they get the same amount, but, do you want $500 in cash, or do you want $500 in CDs that you can then go sell on the road for $15 each? So that was kind of a no-brainer. And, I had forgotten about that, but good on them. They did have a better deal than any of the other bands on Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, they also mentioned that you taught them how to use SoundScan. So
SoundScan. I mean, I think that was, I mean, that made the record industry a lot more honest, for sure. Yep.
You've mentioned that already that there's a was it Durlux? You said that you have a whole album that's recorded. How much unrecorded stuff is there, and do you have that, or does Hasbro own that?
I mean, technically, because it was under the contract, you could say that One Entertainment owns it, but they don't know that they own it. So, it's kind of like finding $5 on the sidewalk, I mean, I have a good bit of stuff unreleased. The fun stuff, I mean, there was so much that was talked about, and there were some things that were actually done that haven't been applied today. I still have a box of DATs. I have that original Durlux record. I know I have some Huntington stuff. I have Huntington's, Durlux, and Alika live at Cornerstone.
Cool.
There are 3 Cornerstone performances that the Huntingtons might have released theirs. I don't know, but I have that. I actually have this. Because I had plans for compilations and all kinds of side projects, but once again, Platinum made it very clear they weren't going to do any more records. With me, they were only going to release the stuff that was in the can. Even then, they didn't, Durlux, they didn't release, even though we had pressed some test copies. There is a remix by Clay Scott from Circle of Dust of Fluffy's. Oh gosh, what was the song they had on like their first or second record? My baby left me, she took the TV. I mean, there's actually a Circle of Dust mix, with A.A. Allen casting a demon out of someone. Like, and I'm like, that has to show up somewhere, dude. I mean, I have to get that out somewhere. There's just crazy stuff like that. I know Alika, Kevin 131 from Alika did all the music. We were going to do a cover of Sick of You by Guar. And he did all the music for it. And it was going to be me, Chris Colbert, and Clank. Then there was going to be a super group that would be Zach from Joe Christmas, Clank, Chris Colbert, Tess Wiley, and they were going to call the project Smart and Handsome. That would have been a flippin' amazing record. Who knows? Maybe there's still hope. Everybody's still alive and doing stuff. So
true.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm sure there's something out there that I did have Alika record that cover of the Reflex that wound up on their Grey Dot record.
Okay.
Because I had an idea to do a Sesame Street cover EP, Bay City Rollers, and Duran Duran, and it just so happened that another label that Chris was working for took the Duran Duran idea and they put that record out a year or so after I was planning it.
Would that be Grey Dot or?
No, it was a mainstream label. They had like some ska bands. Mojo, I think, was the name of the label.
Huh, yeah, I don't know them. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we? I've got two last questions here, but they're just fun questions. Anything else you want to touch on?
I can't think of anything. I mean, I am kind of interested. I mean, if you're the people who listen to this and subscribe to your channel, I would like to know their thoughts about Flying Tart. I would like to know, is there a market for this stuff still? Did it mean as much to other people as it meant to you? I had a great time, making this stuff. It was painful and it was amazing at the same time. To be alive, and even in Nashville at the time, because people would always come through and stay at our house. I connected Brandon Ebel to his music business attorney who was out of Nashville. I remember talking to Brandon when I was still working for REX, and a lot of people don't know, two of his records actually got mainstream distribution through REX. Starflyer 59, their first record, and was it Wish for Eden, I think was the name of the band?
Yeah, that was both the first Tooth Nail release.
They went through the Relativity pipeline via REX. So there was a connect early on. And when Brandon came to town, he stayed at our house.
Yeah.
I
can tell you that it's obviously a very niche market, like our podcast. There's actually a few more podcasts like this that we didn't know about when we started this one. But there's probably two or three others that do similar things. And I can't say that's a huge market. It's obviously a very niche market, but the people who were around then and appreciate this stuff are very passionate about it, obviously, as you can probably see from the sales of like the Julies and the Merle's Forest re-releases and all that kind of stuff,
Well, so. I will plug what I'm doing now, working for Spero Pictures, Spero Pictures. We have a Rumble channel, SperoPictures.com, if you want to see what I'm up to. We do currently 3 podcasts. They have fully produced and released 3 documentaries as well as other stuff, but those are the ones that have the most heat on them right now. One is called Selection Code. It deals with voting machine integrity. and it has some really cool interviews. They also have one called Reawaken, which is a series. It's docu-series. They've done number 1. We're in post on number 2, and there'll be 2 more. But that chronicles the Reawaken tour, Reawaken America tour, with General Flynn and Clay Clark. So that is out. You can find that on the Rumble channel. And they have one called The Trump I Know, which is a documentary about Donald Trump and the women who surround him, business, political, and family, and their relationship to Donald Trump. It was kind of put out to dilute all the womanizing nonsense that was put out about him. And then we have one podcast that we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday live, and it's called Cutting Room Floor. It takes all of these interviews, because we literally have hundreds of hours of interviews with so many people, and we're putting all the stuff that didn't make it into the documentaries into this podcast. We do one called Raw and Uncut, which will take the entire interview in its entirety, uncut, put it out, and then we have one. I don't know if your viewers know of someone named Mel K, but Mel K she is out of New York, very much a Jewish New York woman, and she covers all kinds of different topics, but she had a previous career in Hollywood. She's been in so many movies. And we're doing one with her that launched this week called The Real History of Hollywood, where we're actually talking about like not how Hollywood paints itself, but the real history, like what really happened, what really happened to Kubrick. Was he killed, or did he have a heart attack? Because she had the inside track to a lot of the nefarious stuff that went on in Hollywood. So we're talking about the real history of Hollywood. And then I'm actually looking to do, because I have a music business history and a lot of contacts, mid-December, I'm going to launch one through Spiro Pictures called What the Heck Happened to the Music Business, where I'll be talking to Steve Hennelong, Chris Colbert, Clank, and all these people. But I am kind of curious. I have toyed with, and this is another thing like your listenership and viewership could chime in on. I have ideas about a Flying Tart podcast. One would just be Starball Contribution as a radio show. Now, it wouldn't be called that, but it would be like, if I was still doing college radio, here's what it would sound like. So you'd hear songs, answering machine tapes, ads from the 60s, radio ads, that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of curious as to if people would really like that before I put my time into it. And then an interview type thing with the aforementioned people, except we just talk about personal stuff like, what was your relationship with Clank and what did you guys do that was goofy and crazy? Chris Colbert once caught lizards and put them in DC Talk's touring bus, that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking about that. I'd be interested if there would be an audience for that. But what are your last 2 questions?
Okay, you ready? Now, the first one might be like asking you to pick a favorite child, but what is your favorite Flying Tart release?
I still go back to Starball and the Christmas record, and I listen to that stuff, and I'm like, it's like really good. I mean,
it is.
I think the interstitial stuff in between the songs was really cool, and that I actually mined Light, which had been absorbed by Platinum Entertainment, and found that Don Ho track, and got in a lot of trouble with the record company for putting it on a record that they didn't know about. But it all worked out at the end because it was a donation that Don Ho had done to Oral Roberts for one of his records. So I still listen to that, and I think that's a good record.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that Starball Contribution was both a little, it was eye-opening at the time, because, like I said, a lot of the history that we hear about that time comes from, Orange County still, right? And that kind of stuff. And like I said, Jay and I are from small town Texas. We're from different places actually, but we met in college. but we have no context for anything, for any of this stuff, right? We just show up at our local our local Christian bookstore, and there's a music section, and we're just buying stuff, right? And so when Starval contribution comes out, it's we had both grown up very sheltered lives, and so some of the covers were obviously the first time we're ever hearing some of that stuff.
Oh wow!
Wow. And so it was a lot of fun, and it was crazy, and it introduced us to new worlds of music, and so it was.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the stuff was fun to put together, and even to this day, I'm like, wow, a Christian music store carried that? That's hilarious.
Right.
When the Striper record came out, that's when my parents knew I wasn't just farting around in Nashville. They're like, all right, our son really has a job. That's good. The Striper record too. I mean, I think there's some really good cuts on that. Actually, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's a movie called Electric Jesus. They were originally going to call it. Yeah. I know the director. I was actually going to be the music supervisor for that movie a couple of years ago before I moved to Los Angeles, and then I moved here to Tulsa. So I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years. When I was there, the director is a friend of my sister's in South Carolina, and I was going to be the music supervisor for that movie. So I had read the script and all that, and I know I had a direct effect. If you've seen the movie, the very first song the band plays makes me want to sing. I know that the Striper tribute, Alika's version, affected that movie, so I'm like, yes, that's.
I did enjoy the movie. It was a lot of fun. All right, last question, and it's related to the last question. Just in general, favorite '90s Christian rock album.
Oh, I was believe it or not, I was a big fan of Petra's "Beat the System." I mean, that's but that's late '80s. That's not really '90s.
It is.
But another idea I had was to do a cover of that entire album, have one band like do each one of them, and then I was promoting the Pacifist record, and the two for REX, and the two producers heard my idea and did that Petra tribute for Star Song. That so many people were on. The favorite '90s, man. There's more tracks that I remember than actual records. I remember really liking Starflyer 59's song Sundown. I still think that is just like one of the smoothest sounding songs from that era. And I actually go ahead.
I was going to say that whole album, Fashion Focus, is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I actually used that song. I called Brandon and got the permission to use that song in the short film I did, and it really put the cherry on top for that one.
Nice.
Let's see. One or two Sixpence tracks that went out after they left REX. I was actually in the room, by the way, for that meeting. That meeting was heavy. That was a heavy, heavy meeting. Someone needs to tell their story. Maybe I will. I don't know. But people need to know what happened in that room. That was a heavy moment. Let me see. I liked Steve Taylor. I mean, I thought Squint. I don't think there was really a bad song on that record. That was really good. Still a Striper fan. Always will be. But I mean, as far as Christian music's concerned, truthfully, I didn't listen to a lot of Christian music. Even though I had a lot of friends in those bands. Mostly songs are what I remember than full records. For me, it's very, when you find a record where all the tracks are good, you found gold, and I don't know that I found many of them in the Christian biz. I like a lot of Jesse Sprinkle. He had I can't.
Poor Old Lou or
Poor Old Lou. I thought that Sin was a good record. I don't know if that was the '90s or not, but
it was.
Yeah, that was a really good record. And then there was something he had after that, and I can't remember, but I know there was one track on there that, to this day, I'm like, that's still just a great song. There was a project. I'm sorry?
Rose Blossom Punch.
That was a good record, but his brother, didn't his brother do one after that? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember right now.
I can see the cover in my head, but yeah, that I remember the first track on that album being really good. Or you're bringing it up right now. All I remember is the cover was blue. Aaron Sprinkle. I think it might have been a solo record. I don't know, but
oh, you want Aaron? I brought up Jesse. Let me bring up Aaron.
That one, Moon Traveler, the very first track on that record, that was a good track. I still listen to that song. And
I have not heard this album.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember the first track being amazing. To the point where I'm like, there's a project I'm working on right now, a film project on. If it goes through, if we get the funding for it, I want to see if he can do some music for, if we can use that track. But yeah.
Very cool.
Cool.
You want to plug your stuff again?
Yeah, Sparrow Pictures, doing the podcast, The Real History of Hollywood with Mel K. We're doing Raw and Uncut, and we're doing these things every day except for Sundays. Sunday's the only day we don't do anything. So, and I'm the producer on all that podcast stuff, so that's where my time is right now allocated. Yep.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you very much, Alex. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, no, my pleasure, dude.
Hey, thanks, Alex, for joining us. We had a really good discussion. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of great information there from back in the day. Puts a lot of things into perspective. Jay, what's on the next episode?
Well, it's a great question, Clifton. Maybe DC Talk's free at last if we can get our asses in gear and get that fully covered.
It's a lot to dig into. If everyone doesn't remember this thing from back in the day, there's a lot of things to talk about on every song, and it's taken us a little bit longer to prepare for this one than normal.
Yep, we were pretty surprised. So if it's not that, it might be a mailbag episode. It might be another album. We don't know. I got a new job, and Clifton's busy with work too, so we're not as far ahead as we normally are.
True. All right.
That if you take an infinite number of monkeys,
thank you for joining us for another episode of Your Music Saved Us.
If you enjoyed your time with us, please leave us a review or share this episode. Visit patreon.com/YMSU to contribute and get extended episodes and extra episodes. Visit our website, yourmusicsavedus.com, to find out all the ways to listen. We're on Twitter, maybe not for long, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Join our Facebook group or follow us to keep up with the latest or interact with us. And send complaints and disagreements to yourmusicsavedus@gmail.com.
The music in this episode is the work of lots of different Flying Tart artists, and it's used with apologies, not permission. Some of which I think maybe is still available to buy. Most of it's not.
And there's reissues and stuff, so yeah, I mean, we'll put some reissue links in the show notes. But, Fluffy and the Julies have been reissued by Lost in Ohio, and who else? Tess has had some stuff reissued, and Tess is still making great music.
True.
Go listen to her stuff on Spotify or wherever else you can stream it, or just buy it straight up. Yeah, lots of good stuff out there still.
Yep.
And the Huntingtons are still making good music. Bring them to your city.
Yeah. They're still
and they have
playing
a new album
shows.
out. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Bye, everybody.
A cuddly toy the children choke on the eyes. I had to laugh. Notice of recall. White Bunny, he was my friend. My little stuffed toy.
Kids, anyway. Oh, damn.
Hey. On the eyes, on the eyes. I had to laugh. On the eyes. I had to laugh.